Hey guys, how you going? Hey guys, you worried about the effects of 5G radiation? Well, let me introduce you to the affiliate of this video. They're called EMF Harmonized, and they filter out the harmful RF waves that actually damage our DNA. Kids are also more susceptible to the RF waves than adults are, and what they do is EMFs clump together red blood cells and cause lots of problems. This technology prevents that. And as you can see, they have products for your phone, your tablet and your computer, as well as your body. You can actually buy these for your body. So if you'd like to help a fellow truther and help me out as well, please check out the affiliate link down below. They also actually have a video showing you the red blood cells, how they clump together with 5G radiation, and how this technology protects you from that. Okay guys, if you're interested, check out the affiliate link below. Thanks guys. Hey guys, before I start, I would like to thank Scott, Sandra, Fred and Danielle, just because I have thanked them on Rumble, but I'm not sure if they're over on Rumble, so I had forgotten to thank them here. And thank you to all my PayPals, Patreons and everybody for just listening. I appreciate it. And today I'm going to talk about mysteries and other dimensions. So what I'm going to do is talk about some stories about different dimensions. Then we'll see what the physics have to say about that. And then we'll also see what CERN has to do with that. Okay, let's get into it. Do other realities brush up against our own? Are there parallel dimensions lying just beyond through some thin, untraceable veils separating us? The idea of parallel realities beyond our own is not new. Yet what if this phenomena were to come bursting forth from the realm of theory and speculation and come crashing down into the now? Are there perhaps some people who've stepped over that barrier into domains which we have not seen and which we are not meant to see? Here we will visit the topic with a selection of other cases that seem to imply the possibility that not only are parallel dimensions real, but that they are destinations to which we can be whisked away, whether intentional or not. In the September 1956 issue of Fate magazine, there was a curious story of a woman who apparently shifted into another parallel universe in 1934. According to the report, in the fall of that year, a woman by the name of Miriam Golding had a profoundly unusual experience while riding an elevator with her fiancé in Chicago. The elevator was crowded, and when Miriam made a mistake and got off at the wrong floor, she found that she could not push her way back in past the throng of people and resigned herself to waiting for the next one. That was when she looked around and was startled to realise she was no longer at the store, but rather an expansive train station. The enormous railway station she found herself in was allegedly bustling with fevered activity, with throngs of travellers rushing to their trains and booming announcements of arrivals and departures echoing through the air. There seemed to be no way this busy place could have any connection whatsoever to the music store she had been in moments before. The confused Miriam made her way to an information booth to ask where she was, but found that the woman working there completely ignored her, as if she weren't there at all. Perplexed, Miriam followed a series of signs pointing the way to the street outside, and she emerged out into a mild, sunny afternoon that seemed to be in the midst of summer rather than fall, in a place that was most certainly not Chicago. She wandered about in confusion and noticed that everyone around her seemed to completely ignore her and walk on by, as if they did not even see her. At some point she claimed she saw a confused-looking boy standing in the sidewalk, similarly being passed on by people who seemed to have no idea he was even there, and Miriam approached him, wondering what was going on. The boy was able to actually see and respond to her and looked in her direction, the first time anyone had acknowledged her presence in this strange, surreal place. As she approached, the boy seemed equally relieved that he was visible to Miriam, smiled slightly and purportedly saying, "I guess they let you off at the wrong stop too." The two lost people walked together down the street in confusion, the whole time completely ignored by those around them, and the boy told Miriam of what had happened to him. He claimed that he had been playing tennis in Lincoln, Nebraska, in the United States, and had gone to the locker room to change his shoes. When he had gone back to the courts to play some more, he had found that the tennis courts that had been there moments before, which were now gone, and in their place was a huge train terminal, which had turned out to be the exact same station into which Miriam had enigmatically entered from the elevator. The two allegedly kept on walking until they reached an open area that led to water, and over the waves they could apparently make out a sandbar, with several women sitting upon it chatting and seeming to act as if nothing was beyond the ordinary. To Miriam's astonishment, one of the women was oddly her fiancé's sister. The woman out on the sandbar seemed to notice them and began waving and shouting to Miriam and her companion. This encouraged the boy to try and make a swim out to the sandbar, which did not seem so far and which he was confident he could reach. Yet even though he was a good swimmer, it seemed that no matter how much he tried and pushed against the waves, he was unable to draw any closer to the mysterious sandbar, and he returned to shore in frustration. It was then the sandbar supposedly suddenly vanished into thin air. Miriam closed her eyes in exasperation, disappointment and exhaustion, and then was overcome by the sensation of floating through space. After some time of this odd feeling of hovering in darkness, she claimed she suddenly opened her eyes to find herself sitting atop a stool in the music store in Chicago, which seemed to be in the process of closing for the night, suggesting she had been there for at least several hours. Disorientated, Miriam looked around her for her fiancé but could not find him and decided to head back to his home. When she arrived, her fiancé was notably relieved and explained he had lost her in the store and had waited for her to come to the right floor for a few hours before deciding to go back home. Bizarrely, the fiancé's sister, whom Miriam had seen on the mysterious sandbar earlier, claimed she had seen Miriam in town and even called out to her, but that she had been too absorbed in talking to a young boy to notice her. Where did Miriam go during that time? Why should she see her fiancé's sister on a sandbar while the sister had seen her in town? Or while they could not reach across to communicate? Were they separated by strange barriers we do not and may not ever understand? It's a mystery. Another strange article in the April 1959 issue of Fate magazine tells of the weird experience of a Francis E. Peterson of Keokuk, Iowa. Sorry guys, who in 1935 was travelling home with her husband and 4 children from a weekend trip to Missouri. On the way they noticed what looked like a quaint scenic detour in the area of St. Patrick, and they whimsically took it, driving along the rustic quiet scenery until they reached the rim of an expansive valley. In addition to the picturesque scenery was the rather odd sight of several women in old-fashioned sunbonnets and long skirts and aprons, busily pulling water from a well into simple wooden buckets and carrying them off on wooden poles balanced across their shoulders. There were men here as well, who all had beards and wore similarly old-fashioned clothes, such as smocks and large black hats, and who were tending flocks of sheep and goats or collecting firewood. Enamoured with the quaint, charming scene, they later asked locals what the settlement was, yet were told that no such place had ever existed. Convinced that it did indeed exist, Peterson and her husband returned to the area several times afterwards, but could find no sign of the valley they had seen or its unusual inhabitants, suggesting that either the family or the place they had visited had been temporarily transported over some little understood thin spot between realities. In another similarly strange story from 1962, a Mr. R.W. Balcom and his wife were driving to Lake Tahoe from their home in Live Oak, California. The couple stopped at a quaint restaurant nestled off Highway 50 a few miles from Placerville. They had never noticed the restaurant there before in all of their years of travelling along the same route, even though it seemed from its weathered rustic look to have been there for years, and they decided to stop there for a bite to eat. The food was described as being surprisingly good and the service was cordial and friendly, so they decided that they would visit again. On their return trip from Lake Tahoe, they attempted to seek out the charming little restaurant to eat there again. But when they arrived at the location, it was reportedly gone, as if it had never been there at all. Perplexed, the couple supposedly spent 3 more weekends travelling through the area in an effort to find the restaurant that they were convinced was there, but never found it again. Did Balcom and his wife travel to a parallel universe for lunch? No one knows. An intriguing case of a mysterious doorway to another dimension, and perhaps even through time itself, occurred in 1956 when a treasure hunter by the name of Ron Quinn ventured with his brother Chuck and some friends into the remote and rugged mountains of southeastern Arizona, looking for a mysterious lost Spanish treasure and gold mines. The case begins with high strangeness and only gets more bizarre as it goes on. 3 weeks into their adventure, the treasure hunters set up camp one night, and that evening they were surprised to see 2 large balls of bluish-green light floating about in the darkened starry sky. The bewildered campers determined that these were not flares of any kind, nor any sort of known aircraft. The weird balls of light hovered about for several minutes before vanishing behind some mountain peaks. The next evening the same phenomenon was witnessed again. When they mentioned the strange lights to a local cowboy named Louis Romero, he informed them that the unexplained lights were a recurring phenomenon in the area and had been seen as far back as 1939. The group would spot the strange lights several more times over the course of their excursion. At one point during their travels, the group passed by what looked like a stone archway, which stood out as something of an anomaly upon the landscape, looking decidedly out of place, yet they didn't think much of it until later when they spoke to a native local named John, who claimed that the archway had long been surrounded by strange stories and rumours that anyone who entered the doorway never came out, and that objects thrown in would not emerge from the other side, earning the structure the name Doorway of the Gods. There were also stories of the archway shimmering and of strange figures lurking around it, dressed in old-fashioned clothing that did not seem to be ghosts, as they disturbed the gravel where they stepped and cast shadows, yet they would suddenly vanish. There were also tales of camps near the archway that had been mysteriously abandoned and of prospectors who had never returned from the area. John relayed his own tale of strangeness concerning the archway, claiming that one dark and stormy night he had visited it and peered through it to see that, although the scenery was the same, the sky was oddly clear and blue on the other side. When he looked around the edge of the doorway, the clouds were once again dark and thick, hanging menacingly over the scene, and the bizarre sight with its contrasting views frightened him. Enthralled with these odd stories, Quinn and his group went back through the perilous rocky terrain to find the mysterious archway and investigate it. They managed to locate the strange-looking structure once again, and upon closer inspection, it proved to be surrounded with an unusually large deposit of geodes, some of which were broken open with their interiors glittering in the sun. The archway itself was measured as being around 7 feet high and 5 feet wide, with columns of andesite 15 inches diameter, and it stood beside a steep rocky slope. After checking it out, the team went to work testing out the weird stories by throwing various rocks through the opening, but the rocks all mundanely fell to the ground on the other side, and there was no sign of anything remotely mysterious whatsoever. Increasingly sceptical, some of the members of the team boldly put their arms through without incident, although no one was willing to try stepping all the way through. After around an hour of this, they departed no closer to an understanding the supposed mystery of this location. However, a weird series of events would unfold in the coming days that would make them think something strange was going on. One day, as they were checking out the portal yet again and collect some of the geodes, Roy and another member of the team, Walt, noticed that the stone portal seemed to be shimmering as if shimmering in intense heat, even though it was a cold January day. The odd shimmering allegedly lasted a few minutes, during which time both men claimed they could feel a building pressure within their ears before the shimmering and weird physical sensation slowly ebbed away. The inexplicable event spooked both of them, especially Roy, who vowed never to go anywhere near the archway again. On another occasion, the group came across another group of 3 treasure hunters who claimed that they had also camped out near the mysterious stone portal. The group claimed that that evening their camp had been hit by what sounded like rain hitting their tents, even though it was clear. Looking out of their tents, they were met with a sight of small reddish-brown pebbles around the size of a pea falling in great numbers from above. The pebbles were found to be warm to the touch, and there was no explanation for where they had come from. They seemed to be made of some king of iron ore. All of these escalating odd occurrences would point to something decidedly strange going on at the archway, but the most bizarre incident would happen years after the expedition was over. 4 years after that fateful treasure hunt, on October the 14th, 1973, Chuck Quinn was compelled to make a personal trip to the side of the stone portal that eluded their understanding and arrived at the canyon that led up to the slopes that would lead up to the site. Chuck went about climbing up the steep, rocky slopes towards the archway, stopping for a breather about halfway up the harrowing climb. It was here, as he looked out west over the majestic scenery all around him, that he noticed that there was a canyon that should not have been there. Baffled, he made his way back down the slope to enter from the east, and it was here that he realised that in fact he was in the same canyon he'd been in before, only he had somehow been transported 250 yards down the canyon he had hiked along, and to another slope that was facing south rather than west. The strange event convinced him that indeed there was something strange going on here, and hastily left the scene. Was this some sort of doorway to another dimension, or merely tall tales? One wonders if perhaps some of the most bizarre vanishings and reappearances of people have also have some form of interdimensional shift at their core. At about 7 p.m. on August the 15th, 1960, 6-year-old Kathy Kramer of Woods Hole, Massachusetts, simply vanished from her room in her home. Her parents had checked on her when she was sleeping 1 minute, and the next she was gone without a trace. When authorities arrived at the house was searched from top to bottom, and no signs of forced entry or a struggle could be found. Kathy's bed seemed to be in a peaceful state, with no sign of being disturbed in any kind of confrontation. The window to the room was also closed and showed no signs of anyone coming in or going out that way. An intensive search was immediately launched, composed of hundreds of people, including police, firemen, volunteers, airmen from nearby Otis Air Force Base, and bloodhounds, as well as the Coast Guard scouring the nearby coast. Yet absolutely no evidence of the missing girl could be found anywhere. She had simply vanished off the face of the earth. Then later at 3 a.m. on that same evening, Kathy's very worried parents went to her room to be startled by the sight of their missing daughter sleeping peacefully in her bed as if she'd never been gone. When she was asked about where she had been, the girl gave the cryptic response of, "I'm not telling." What in the world happened to this little girl? How could a 6-year-old disappear from her bed, elude an intensive search by various professionals, and then reappear fast asleep exactly where she had vanished? Is this also perhaps an example of someone crossing through the veil between realities to pass temporarily into some parallel world or dimension? The only person who knows the answer to that is Kathy Kramer herself, and she's not telling. So are any of these accounts somehow anchored in any way to reality as we know it? Are these the realm of the lost mind untethered, spinning fantastical tales either out of hallucination, insanity, or irrational attempt to make sense of distorted perceptions? Okay, from Universe Today, they explain a universe of 10 dimensions. When someone mentions different dimensions, we tend to think of things like parallel universes, alternate realities that exist parallel to our own, but where things work or happen differently. However, the reality of dimensions and how they play a role in the ordering of our universe is really quite different from this popular characterization. To break it down, dimensions are simply the different facets of what we perceive to be reality. We are immediately aware of 3 dimensions that surround us on a daily basis. Those that define the length, width and depth of all our objects and universes, the X, Y and Z axis respectively. Beyond these 3 visible dimensions, scientists believe that there may be many more. In fact, the theoretical framework of the superstring theory posits that the universe exists in 10 different dimensions. These different aspects are what govern the universe, the fundamental forces of nature, and all the elementary particles contained within. The first dimension is that which gives it length. The second dimension is height. The third dimension is depth. The fourth dimension is time. The fifth dimension, we would see a world slightly different from our own that would give us meanings of measuring the similarity and differences between our world and other possible ones. In the sixth, we would see a plane of possible worlds where we would compare and position all the possible universes that start with the same initial conditions as this one. In theory, if you could master the fifth and sixth dimension, you could travel back in time or go to different futures. The seventh dimension, you have access to possible worlds that start with different initial conditions, whereas in the fifth and sixth, the initial conditions were the same and subsequent actions were different. Here, everything is different from the beginning of time. The eighth dimension, again, gives us a plane of such possible universe histories, each of which begins with different initial conditions and branches out infinitely. The ninth dimension, we can compare all the possible universe histories, starting with all the different possible laws of physics and initial conditions. In the 10th and final dimension, we arrive at the point in which everything possible and imagined is covered. Beyond this, nothing can be imagined by us lowly mortals, which makes the natural limitation of what we can conceive in terms of dimensions. So this is string theory, it regards. And now let's go into CERN, what they might have to do with all this. CERN are portals in the sky and other high strangeness. Of all the strange claims made about CERN, the idea that particle physicists in Geneva, Switzerland have actually opened a portal into another world is perhaps the most compelling one. Is there any evidence that this has happened? That they've opened a portal, caused a tear in time and space, or even unlocked a gateway to hell itself? Read on and see what we run into. But first, a history of the Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider, LHC, at the European Organisation for Nuclear Research, CERN, in Geneva, Switzerland, opened in 2008, with the first beam circulated on September 10th of that year. The goal of any collider is to accelerate particles at incredible speeds, smashing them together and detecting the results of those collisions. What scientists hope to find by doing so are new particles or reactions, new information on how the universe works at a fundamental level. The first true collisions happened in 2010, when the LHC first began operation. It reached a combined energy level of 7 tera-electron volts, or TeV. It's been upgraded over the years, the most recent reaching 13 TeV, reportedly the present world record. The greatest achievement of the LHC so far is undoubtedly the discovery of the Higgs boson. As CERN themselves reported on the 4th of July 2012, the ATLAS and CMS experiments at CERN's Large Hadron Collider announced they had each observed a new particle in the mass region around 125 GeV. The particle was consistent with the Higgs boson, and in 2013, Francois Englert and Peter Higgs received the Nobel Prize in Physics for the discovery. In 2011, Fermilab posted a good overview of the nature of the Higgs boson and Higgs field. However, aside from the scientific breakthroughs at CERN, many believe there's more afoot than simple forays into particle physics. Some believe they're busy at work attempting to, or accidentally, opening portals. Well, in June of 2016, a series of incredible photos of the skies above CERN appeared online, courtesy of photographer Christophe Sarez. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, the images were captured only 10 days after a wake experiment, or advanced wake field experiment, began at its facility at CERN on June 16, 2016. In response, some claimed that the LHC had generated a portal above Geneva. The images were, after all, pretty extraordinary. Dark, towering clouds filled with lightning and a rainstorm underneath. Indeed, many such claims have been made over the years. In 2015, Yahoo News reported on footage of an alleged vortex forming over Geneva, what they referred to as a UFO gateway. In the footage, clouds swirl into a point as if it were a black hole, and a number of small bright orbs can be seen entering it. The vortex then vanishes. The UFO portal had allegedly erupted directly over the Large Hadron Collider. Unfortunately, despite media coverage, this footage turned out to be CGI. Another alleged portal appeared over Geneva on July the 5th, 2016. This one in the form of clouds that created a ring when looked at on radar. According to the video, the cloud portal coincided with an emergency shutdown of the LHC, which happened after a weasel hopped over a substation fence, bumped a transformer and knocked out the power. This at least was true. A weasel did hop the fence and was unfortunately electrocuted by said transformer. It was eventually stuffed and put on display at the Rotterdam Natural History Museum in their Dead Animal Tales exhibition. Whether or not its action resulted in a portal opening up above the particle accelerator, I'll leave that for you to decide. In August 2016, a video appeared online that seemed to depict a ritual sacrifice on the CERN grounds right in front of the statue of Shiva, the Hindu deity. In the video, you can see a number of cloaked figures gathered near the statue, surrounding a woman. The video is taken from the point of view of an unsuspecting onlooker, who decides to run for it after realising what's about to go down. According to The Guardian, this was a hoax, and CERN itself launched an investigation to find out who was responsible. According to their report, pranking scientists were suspected. Prank or not, this didn't exactly help dispel rumours that CERN was up to something odd. In 2014, the Shiva statue in 2014, this person wrote about the Shiva statue and why some believe it's symbolic of CERN's quest not only to open portals, but to open a gateway for the Anunnaki to return to Earth. Others believe the LHC may in fact be an attempted portal to the underworld itself. As Metro reported in July 2017, some bloggers online believe that CERN's experiments are in fact an attempt to build the kingdom of the Antichrist, who will eventually step through the portal and rule our planet. Aren't they already? Perhaps related to the strange activities in the skies above CERN is the incident of November 2009, where Iberworld Airbus A330-300 allegedly vanished temporarily. As the story goes, the plane was carrying 170 passengers and had been heading towards Santa Cruz, Bolivia, when it seemingly disappeared mid-flight. The plane was then reported to reappear roughly 5,500 miles away at Tenerife North Airport on the island of Tenerife in the Canary Islands, or Tenerife. According to an Inquisitor article published in 2016, some believe CERN's Large Hadron Collider may have been the culprit of this mysterious turn of events, given that it had just begun circulating beams the previous year and was preparing to do so again. Prior to November 2009, the LHC had temporarily been out of commission due to a malfunction dubbed the Quench Incident, which occurred on September 9, 2008. Liquid helium vented into the collider's tunnel, damaging 53 superconducting magnets. Purveyors of the Airbus theory believe the strange event may have happened during the preparations for the LHC's relaunch in early November. According to the theory, scientists at CERN had accidentally produced some kind of time warp during one of the LHC startups. They immediately shut everything down. LHC machine coordinator Dr. Michael Lamond said officially the shutdown had been caused by a bird that dropped a bit of baguette, causing the magnets to heat up and almost resulted in another Quench incident, as reported by the Telegraph on November 6, 2009. And yet some didn't buy this explanation, believing instead it was a cover-up to prevent the public from finding out that the LHC had accidentally opened a time portal, or so said the Inquisitor. The so-called time warp, or so the story continues, was caused by LHC distorting Earth's magnetic field, creating a time wave that reverberated through the planet's core. The wave passed through the Gate of the Sun, an ancient megalithic stone arch in Bolivia. It is believed by some to be a stargate itself, a portal to other worlds. The time wave then continued until it made contact with the Iberworld Airbus, temporarily displacing it in time and space. According to the bizarre tale, all 170 passengers, along with the plane, spontaneously teleported 5,500 miles from Bolivia to the Canary Islands, where they were able to land safely, though confused. The true story of the Airbus, or Air Comet A333, may in fact be a little less extraordinary, depending on what you want to believe. According to the Aviation Herald, the plane was meant to perform a flight from Madrid, Barajas, Spain, to Santa Cruz, Bolivia, but somehow wound up in Santa Cruz de Tenerife, Canary Islands. Reportedly, the crew had confused the two, though the story certainly leaves a lot of questions. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention John Titor in a discussion about CERN, the creation of portals. Titor often discussed the nature of world lines, how time travel would be discovered through experiments at CERN. He was quoted as saying, "The breakthrough that will allow for this technology will occur within a year or so when CERN brings their larger facility online." This was in January the 31st, 2001. Titor's world lines were effectively timelines, branches in the multiverse, even representing the infinite possible courses of events. According to his story, CERN would go on to create micro-singularities, which would then be harnessed to essentially open portals into these other world lines or timelines, allowing for backward travel through time. What I found most interesting today is how the loading screen on CERN's website reminds me somewhat of John Titor's insignia, which he shared online back in 2000 to 2001. You can compare the two, if you would like to look. Some questions whether or not the alleged strange activity surrounding CERN is deliberate, that scientists are intentionally trying to open portals into other worlds, or if it's all inadvertent, an unexpected outcome of dealing with forces we may not be able to control. Okay guys, you can let me know what you think down below. It certainly is interesting to look into. And do you like the stories of like mysterious disappearances and things like that? Because I could try to find more of them. Especially I find it interesting, the interdimensional travel, if that's what is happening. I find it interesting that A lot of stories have, especially of missing people, where they hear the search groups looking for them, and they are calling out to the search groups, but the search groups can't hear them. The dogs can't find them, and it's just very strange. Okay, guys, so let me know what you think down below, and I'll look forward to reading your comments. Have a good morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, guys, bye.